Most fairy tales begin with once upon a time. But Nova's tale began with silence. Not a vow, not a spell, just the closing of her lips and the tightening of her throat as she chose at the age of 10 to say nothing at all. For 9 years, she never spoke a single word, 8 of which she spent in the palace of the Alpha King. An invisible girl scrubbing floors and folding linens by day, a silent shadow slipping through stone corridors by night. To the courtiers, she was just another servant. To the nobles, forgettable. And to the king, she was no one. Nova had never meant to fall for him. Not when she was nothing more than the mute girl who poured his tea. But love doesn't ask for permission. And her heart, stubborn thing that it was, decided long ago that it belonged to a king who didn't even know her name. He never looked her way, and that was how it had to be. Because Nova wasn't just a servant. She was a princess hidden in plain sight. And her silence wasn't a choice. It was a sacrifice. To speak would doom her brothers to remain forever trapped in wolf form. To save them, she had to weave 6 shirts in secret, in silence and in suffering. So perhaps this is not a fairy tale at all, but something older, wilder, more primal, a story of wolves and witches, of curses and kingdoms, of a girl who gave up her voice not for a prince, but for the lives of the brothers she loved. Or perhaps it is simply the tale of a girl who has loved too deeply for too long, with no hope of her feelings ever being returned. For how could an Alpha King ever notice a servant who cannot speak, cannot call his name, cannot cry out the truth she has held inside for 8 long years? How could he ever see what's been right before him all along? Chapter 1. Moonlight spilled like silver water across the royal gardens. In its ethereal glow, the wolfsbane flowers shimmered, their delicate purple blooms belying their deadly nature. Nova moved silently between the carefully tended beds, selecting only the most mature stems, her touch so gentle that by morning no one would notice the harvest. 8 years of midnight gatherings had taught her patience. Distant music from the ballroom floated through the night air, a perfect cover for her clandestine work. The king had returned from his northern campaign today, and the court celebrated with characteristic excess. Even the guards, who usually patrolled this section, lingered by windows, eager for glimpses of the spectacle inside, which meant the gardens were mercifully deserted. Nova's fingers burned as wolfsbane sap touched her skin, its toxicity causing a familiar tingling. For shifters, the plant was dangerous to touch, deadly if ingested. She endured the discomfort without complaint, filling her leather pouch with the precious blooms. This is for Caden, she thought, selecting a particularly fine specimen, her eldest brother, whose silver-streaked wolf still carried the regal bearing of the crown prince he once was. And this for Liam, her youngest brother, whose playful spirit somehow survived despite 9 years trapped in a wolf's body. When the burning became too much, she paused and closed her eyes, conjuring memories of her brothers as they once were. Their embraces had sustained her through pain, silence, and years of hiding. 5 shirts completed, the 6th nearly done, lacking only a right sleeve. Just 6 more months of silence, and they would be free. 6 more months of secret harvesting, of weaving by candlelight, of holding her tongue. A twig snapped nearby. Nova froze, heart leaping to her throat. She melted into the shadow of a large topiary. Breath shallow and controlled. Footsteps approached. Unhurried, confident. Not the brisk pace of a patrolling guard, but the stride of someone who moved freely through every inch of the palace. The footsteps of a king. Nova should flee. Any servant caught in the royal gardens after dark faced severe punishment. But as the figure rounded the hedge, moonlight lit his face and her breath caught. The Alpha King was here. In the silvery light, his features looked otherworldly, strong jaw, high cheekbones, and eyes that gleamed with intelligence and restrained wildness. He walked alone, his tall frame moving with predatory grace, his wolf restless, as it always was when he came here searching for peace. This wasn't the first time she had seen him here. In 8 years of silent watching, she had learned the subtle shifts in his expression. The furrow between his brows when Borderland reports troubled him, the faint softening around his eyes when he spoke with children. The garden was her most dangerous harvesting ground. Yet she returned night after night for one reason, a chance to glimpse him. How many nights had she imagined stepping from the shadows? How many times had she composed conversations in her mind, wondering what she might say if her voice were hers to give? Her fingers itched to smooth the tension from his shoulders. Her heart ached to know what troubled him tonight, to offer comfort. She had seen his kindness in secret moments. The gold coins slipped to aging servants when no one was looking. The hours he spent training young guards instead of delegating. So she had fallen in love, not with a crown, but with the man who bore it with reluctant grace. Sometimes the yearning became a physical pain, a hollow ache beneath her ribs that never truly faded. To be so close yet forever separated by silence and station. To see a smile offered to others, never to her. Her wolf stirred inside her, pressing up against her thoughts with a familiar pull. Mate, it whispered as it had for 8 years.
Mine.
Nova silenced it as always, a foolish fancy. Even if the legends of fated mates were true, even if this pull was more than simple attraction, she could never claim him. Not while her brothers remained cursed, not while she was bound to silence. Your Majesty. A new voice shattered the moment. A courtier entered the garden, elaborately dressed in celebration finery. Lord Brennan, the king acknowledged him without turning. I requested privacy. Nova knew Brennan well from her silent observations, the king's most trusted advisor, whose counsel he valued above all. I understand that, Your Majesty, but the Queen. I'm certain the Queen can entertain herself for a few moments, the king interrupted, irritation creeping into his tone. As she is most eager to discuss the proposed alliance, Brennan pressed. The council believes a union between our kingdoms would bring unprecedented prosperity. Nova's heart stuttered. A union? The king's voice flattened. You speak of marriage as though it were merely a trade agreement. Lord Brennan shifted uneasily. Duty often requires personal sacrifice, sire. The king sighed, dragging a hand through his dark hair. Yes, I'm well acquainted with duty, old friend. Nova's fingers curled into the bark of the tree. Marriage. Her king was being pushed toward marriage. The thought sent a wave of pain through her chest, a crushing pressure that made it hard to breathe. Someone else would stand at his side. Someone else would know his thoughts, his touch, his smile. Someone else would be everything Nova could never be. And she had no choice but to accept it.
She had always known it would happen someday.
What was she but a silent servant, a shadow? The Queen is beautiful, Lord Brennan offered. And her kingdom's resources would complement ours perfectly, the silver mines alone. I am aware of her assets, the king cut in, as I am aware of the rumors surrounding her previous marriages. Nova leaned forward, straining to hear. Rumors only, sire, Brennan said smoothly. Her first husband died in the rebellion 9 years ago. The others, well, powerful men often have enemies. 3 husbands, all dead within a year of marriage, the king mused. Perhaps I should be flattered. She considers me worthy to be the 4th. 3 husbands. A chill crept down Nova's
spine.
Could this queen? No, it couldn't be. Why would she come here? She didn't need to. The council merely asks that you consider the alliance, Brennan said. Speak with her, dance with her. Perhaps you'll find her agreeable. The king stared up at the full moon for a long moment, silent. My wolf is restless tonight, he said, as it often is in these gardens, like it's searching for something I cannot name. Nova's heart pounded, her own wolf whined in response, straining toward him despite her desperate efforts to contain it. Perhaps what it seeks awaits you in the ballroom, Brennan suggested. The king's laugh held no humor. Perhaps, he straightened, posture shifting back into that of a monarch. Very well, let us return to the celebration. As they turned to go, a breeze stirred the garden. The king paused, nostrils flaring. Do you smell that? He asked, turning back toward the shadows where Nova hid. The gardens are full of strange plants, sire, Brennan replied. The master gardener cultivates many varieties for medicinal use. For one terrifying moment, The king's gaze swept over Nova's hiding place. She pressed further into the shadows, barely breathing. His eyes, amber even in the moonlight, seemed to pierce the dark. Then the moment passed. He shook his head and followed Brennan back toward the palace. Nova waited until their footsteps faded before allowing herself to breathe. She should return to the servants' quarters, continue weaving, forget what she had heard. But something pulled her toward the palace. A desperate need to see this queen. The woman who might claim what Nova's heart said was hers. Just one glimpse just to know who she was. Moving silently, Nova crept to the servants' entrance, near the great hall. Music and laughter spilled through the doors as servers bustled in and out with trays of wine and food. She slipped inside, hugging the walls where the candlelight didn't reach. The ballroom blazed with 1,000 candles, their light reflecting off jewels and silks as nobles danced and laughed. At the far end, on a dais stood the king, composed, regal, and beside him, Nova's blood turned to ice, tall and regal, her silver white hair arranged in a crown of braids. The woman moved with utter confidence. Her ageless face bore the same cold beauty Nova remembered. The beauty that had enchanted her father, destroyed him. Lady Morwen, Queen of Silverest, the witch who had cursed her brothers, the woman who had murdered her father and stolen their throne. And now she stood beside the king, her crimson-tipped fingers resting on his arm, her painted lips curved in a smile that promised ruin. Chapter 2. Nova pressed herself into an alcove behind a heavy tapestry. From this hidden vantage point, she could observe the grand celebration. How Lady Morwen commanded the center of the ballroom as if she had been born to rule Ironhold rather than merely visiting it. The scene was hauntingly familiar. 9 years ago, Nova had watched from behind similar curtains as Morwen charmed her way into her father's court and his heart. King Kais of Silverest had been a strong, vibrant ruler before Morwen's arrival. Nova had been only 6 then, but she remembered clearly how her father would scoop her into his arms, his laughter booming through the castle halls. Then came Morwen with her bewitching smile and her magical potions. Within weeks of their marriage, her father changed. His vibrant presence dimmed. His eyes grew distant and vacant. He no longer recognized Nova or her brothers, becoming a hollow puppet who echoed only Morwen's words and desires. The court whispered that grief for his late queen had finally caught up with him. But Nova's eldest brother, Caden, suspected darker forces at work. "She's draining him," Caden had whispered one night after they'd been turned away from their father's chambers for the 5th time, feeding on his life force to strengthen her magic. They had planned to confront Morwen to demand answers, but they never got the chance. One night, Liam, her youngest brother, had burst into her chamber, panic in his eyes. "We have to leave now," he'd hissed, pulling her from bed. "Father is dead. Morwen claims we poisoned him. The guards are coming for us." They fled into the night, seeking refuge in the dense forests bordering their kingdom. For 3 years, they lived as fugitives, moving constantly to stay ahead of Morwen's hunters. Nova's childhood vanished in those woods, replaced by harsh lessons in survival. Then came the night Morwen's witch hunters finally caught up with them. Nova closed her eyes against the memory. The clearing lit by witch fire, her brothers shifting to wolf form to protect her. Morwen's cruel laughter as she cast her curse. "Let your beast forms become your prison," she had proclaimed. Silver light enveloping the 6 princes. "Let your human minds watch helplessly from within." Only Nova had escaped the curse, hidden beneath fallen leaves by Liam's quick thinking before he transformed. She had lain motionless, scarcely breathing, as Morwen declared the princess surely dead in the wilderness, her brothers now mindless beasts to be hunted for sport. That very night, her grandmother's spirit had come to her in a dream, revealing the cure. 6 shirts woven from silver wolfsbane. Complete silence until all are finished. This alone will break the curse on your brothers. Nova wandered for months, searching for enough wolfsbane to begin her task, until she learned of King Daemon's famous gardens. Taking a position in his kitchens had been her salvation, abundant wolfsbane, and the safety of anonymity. Now, watching Morwen circle Daemon like a predator, sizing up prey, Nova recognized the pattern unfolding again. Was Silverest no longer enough? Did Morwen now desire Ironhold, too? Seeking to add Daemon's kingdom to her collection through marriage before disposing of him, like she had Nova's father. The thought of Daemon's strength fading, his vibrant spirit dimming to nothing, made Nova physically ill. Her fingers curled into fists, nails biting into her palms. She should warn him. She had to. But how? She had never learned to read or write. Her education cut short when she fled the castle at 6. Even if she broke her vow of silence, risking her brother's permanent curse, would a king believe accusations from a mute servant girl? And Morwen would recognize her instantly, would silence her permanently before she could reveal the truth. Nova's mind raced with impossible choices as she watched Morwen laugh at something Daemon said, her hand lingering too long on his arm. The witch's ruby ring, the same one she had worn when casting the curse, glinted in the candlelight, a reminder of her power. As the night wore on, Nova noticed Daemon growing increasingly weary of the diplomatic pleasantries. He maintained his kingly composure, but she recognized the subtle signs of fatigue, the slight stiffness in his shoulders, the smile that no longer reached his eyes. Finally, after exchanging words with Lord Brennan, he made his excuses to the court. "I must retire earlier than planned," she heard him say. "Tomorrow's negotiations require a clear mind." Morwen's painted lips formed a disappointed pout. "The night is still young, Your Majesty." "For some, perhaps," Daemon replied smoothly. "I look forward to continuing our discussions tomorrow." He bowed formally over Morwen's hand, not quite kissing it, Nova noted with a flicker of satisfaction, before departing the ballroom. Several quarters followed. Morwen remained, her calculating gaze tracking him until he vanished from view. The moment he was gone, Nova saw a shift in Morwen's demeanor. The witch's charming smile dimmed, replaced by cold determination. She scanned the room until her eyes landed on a servant girl carrying a tray of wine goblets. Irene, a quiet girl who worked the upper floors, including the royal chambers. Nova watched as Morwen beckoned her with an imperious gesture. Irene approached, head bowed. They spoke briefly, Morwen's lips barely moving. Then, with practiced sleight of hand, the witch pressed something into Irene's palm. A vial and several gold coins, both disappearing quickly into the girl's pocket. Movement at the edge of the ballroom caught Nova's eye. Irene, another servant from the upper halls, slipped away from the celebration. Nothing unusual except for the furtive glance she cast toward Morwen before vanishing through a side door. More concerning still was the small vial clutched in her hand, a vial that hadn't been there moments ago. Instinct prickled along Nova's spine. With a final glance at Morwen, now surrounded by fawning courtiers, Nova slipped from her hiding place to follow Irene. The servant corridors were mostly empty, most staff busy with the celebration. Nova kept to the shadows, maintaining distance as she tracked Irene through the winding halls. To her surprise, Irene didn't head toward the kitchens or servants' quarters, but up the grand staircase toward the royal wing, an area forbidden to most servants.
Nova hesitated.
Following meant leaving the relative safety of the lower halls. If she was caught, there would be questions, punishments. But something was wrong. She felt it. Clinging to the wall, she climbed the stairs silently, pausing at each landing to make sure Irene hadn't noticed her. At the top, she glimpsed the girl turning down the corridor toward the king's private chambers. Nova's heart pounded. Irene was going to Daemon's rooms immediately after speaking to Morwen. The pattern was too familiar, too dangerous to ignore. She slipped into a nearby alcove as Irene approached the guards outside the king's study. "Evening wine for His Majesty," she heard her say. To Nova's horror, the guards nodded and let her through. Nova moved quickly. At the refreshment station nearby, she grabbed a silver tray of sliced fruits. Something a kitchen servant might plausibly deliver, and hurried forward. "Another refreshment for His Majesty?" one guard asked, raising an eyebrow. Nova nodded, gesturing subtly toward Irene. The guard shrugged. "Very well. He's asked not to be disturbed. Don't linger." The door opened. Nova followed close behind. The king's private study was spacious yet intimate. Firelight casting warm shadows across dark paneled walls. Maps and books lined the shelves. A heavy desk stood near the windows overlooking the gardens. And there, seated before the fire, was Damon. He changed from formal attire, now in a loose white shirt and dark breeches. His collar was open, his hair tousled. The fire gilded his skin, outlining the strong lines of his face, his chest. He looked younger, human. Nova's throat went dry. In 8 years of secret longing, she'd never seen him like this. Her wolf stirred. Warmth flooded her veins. "Mate," it whispered.
Ours.
"Your evening wine, your majesty," Irene said, curtsying. "Just set it there," Damon said distractedly, not looking up. "Thank you." As she placed the goblet, Nova saw Irene tip the vial's contents into the wine with a flick of her wrist. The liquid shimmered briefly, then settled, its danger cloaked in glamour. "Will there be anything else, your majesty?" Irene asked. "No, that will be all." As Irene turned to leave, she noticed Nova. Her eyes narrowed. Nova stepped forward quickly, setting her fruit platter beside the wine. Damon barely glanced at her. Then his hand reached for the goblet. Without thinking, Nova moved. Her sleeve brushed the glass. It tipped and spilled. Red wine blooming like blood across the table and floor. Damon bolted upright. Nova froze. And then he looked at her. Really looked. Time seemed to slow. The crackling fire, Irene's gasp, the spreading wine, all faded to insignificance as their eyes met and held. A flicker of bewilderment crossed his face, followed by something deeper, more primal. His pupils dilated, the amber of his irises darkening to molten gold. Nova couldn't breathe, couldn't move. 8 years of yearning crystallized into this single impossible moment. "I'll fetch cloths immediately, your majesty," Irene stammered from somewhere far away, her voice thin and unimportant in the charged silence. The king gave no sign he'd heard. Instead, he took a step toward Nova, then another, drawn by something beyond conscious thought. The firelight cast half his face in shadow, but his eyes, those eyes that had haunted her dreams, remained fixed on hers with an intensity that made her heart stutter. "Who are you?" he breathed, the question filled with wonder. Nova's lips parted of their own accord, 8 years of stored words rushing to the surface. "Yours," her heart cried out. "I'm yours." For one dangerous moment, she nearly broke her vow, nearly sacrificed her brothers for the chance to answer him. Horror washed over her as she realized how close she'd come to speaking. 6 shirts completed, but the vow still stood. 6 more months of silence required. With a strangled gasp, Nova whirled and fled the chamber, her heart pounding wildly in her chest. Chapter 3. Nova hadn't slept. Every time she did, she saw those amber eyes turning gold, heard his voice again. Dawn found her curled by the window, the nearly finished 6th shirt clutched in trembling hands. The wolf's bane fibers seared her skin, but the pain was nothing compared to the storm inside her. In fitful dreams, Morwen had laughed as she dragged Nova before the court. The lost princess, she declared, poison on her lips, treachery in her heart. Her brothers had watched from the forest's edge, their wolf eyes filled with accusation. "You almost spoke. You nearly doomed us for him." Nova shoved the memories away. She tucked the shirt beneath her thin mattress and forced herself to prepare for the day. She was being foolish. He wouldn't remember her. She was no one, just a servant who had spilled wine and
fled.
What mattered now was keeping Morwen away from Damon. The potion in the wine made her intent clear. But how could a mute servant girl protect a king? These thoughts swirled as Nova slipped into her place in the bustling kitchen. She kept her head down, chopping vegetables with practiced speed. No one mentioned last night's incident, which meant Irene had kept silent. A relief. More ginger in the porridge, the head cook barked, passing between tables. His Majesty requested it yesterday. Nova allowed herself a quiet smile. Damon always asked for more ginger when the weather cooled, one of many tiny details she had quietly collected over the years. The familiar kitchen chaos enveloped her. Steam, clattering pots shouted orders. It was comforting. Here. She was invisible, safe until everything stopped. The silence hit like a dropped plate. Nova froze mid-chop, her knife suspended in air. "Your Majesty," the head cook stammered, wiping his hands as he bowed. Nova's heart lurched. Slowly, she turned, already knowing who stood in the doorway. King Daemon Blackthorn. No crown, no armor, just a dark tunic and quiet authority. Brennan and the steward flanked him, both looking equally stunned by the king's presence. "Please continue your work," Daemon said, his deep voice settling over the room. "I don't wish to disrupt the morning preparations." The kitchen came back to life, but with stiff, self-conscious movements. Whispers stirred behind every ladle and chopping board. Nova ducked her head and resumed her task, hands trembling. Maybe if she stayed small, unseen, he wouldn't notice her. "Please don't see me," she thought. "Please don't remember." She felt him moving closer, his presence unmistakable. The head cook guided him proudly through the stations. Then, "And here we prepare the morning fruits and vegetables, Your Majesty." He was directly behind her now.
Nova Schulderstansa.
She didn't breathe. "Ah," Daemon said, his voice brushing over her like velvet. "There you are." The certainty in his tone was a blow, as if he'd been searching for her. Still, she didn't lift her head, couldn't meet his eyes. Her wolf strained toward him, but Nova kept her focus on the cutting board. "You're the girl from last night," Daemon continued. A statement, not a question. The room went still again. "Your Majesty," the cook said nervously, "has this girl caused some offense? I assure you, she will be disciplined appropriately." "No offense," Daemon said gently. Nova felt him step closer. She gripped the knife tighter, as if it could root her to the ground. Then his fingers brushed beneath her chin, lifting her face. She resisted the urge to flinch, forcing herself to meet the gaze that haunted her dreams. Up close she saw every detail. The gold flecks in his amber eyes, the faint scar over his brow, the softness in his expression, no cold mask, no royal detachment, just him. Curious, intense, and something more. Something that called to the wild thing inside her. "You never told me your name," he said softly. The words meant for her alone, though they echoed in the silence. Her lips parted. The need to answer rose so fast she bit the inside of her cheek to stop it. She couldn't speak. Not yet. Not for 6 more months. "She can't tell you, Your Majesty," the cook interjected. "The girl is mute. Has been since she came to us 8 years ago." Daemon didn't look away from her. "Is that so?" he murmured, thoughtful. "She's a simple girl," the cook added quickly, "but a hard worker. Never causes trouble." "And what do you call her?" Daemon asked, his thumb grazing her jaw before lowering his hand. "Well, we the staff calls her Star, Your Majesty." "Star?" His brow lifted. "She's always looking at the stars," offered a younger kitchen girl, flushing when he glanced her way. "I Star," Daemon repeated, tasting the name. Nova's heart stumbled in her chest. He looked at her one last time before turning to the steward. "From today, Star will serve as my personal attendant." A collective gasp rippled through the room. "See that her things are moved to appropriate quarters near my chambers." The steward bowed. "As you wish, Your Majesty." Nova stood frozen, knife clenched in her hand as Daemon turned back to her. "Until this afternoon," he said, his voice low and certain. "Star." And then he was gone, leaving silence, stares, and the unraveling of everything she had worked so hard to keep hidden. Chapter 4. The royal chambers were grander than Nova had ever imagined, even after 8 years in the palace. As Daemon's personal attendant, she now had access to spaces few servants ever entered. Most daunting of all, his bedchamber. "Your Majesty, with all due respect, this is highly irregular," Lord Brennan said, casting Nova a wary glance. "A personal attendant should be trained, experienced. Sar has served in this palace for 8 years. Daemon replied without looking up. "But she's mute," Brennan pressed. "How will she announce visitors?" I find silence refreshing, old friend. Brennan sighed in defeat, bowing stiffly before exiting, and leaving Nova alone with the king for the first time since that charged moment in his chambers. Damon kept reading, content to let her stand in silence. Nova lowered her gaze, heart pounding, his scent wrapped around her, stirring her wolf. At last, he set the papers aside and turned to her. "Are you afraid of me, little star?" It wasn't a question. Nova glanced up, then quickly lowered her eyes again, giving a small shake of her head. "Then what troubles you?" Damon rose, approaching with slow, deliberate steps. "You're trembling." Nova forced stillness into her limbs as he stopped before her. "Look at me," he said gently. It took all her courage, but she met his eyes. Amber light burned in his gaze. "There," he murmured, a hint of satisfaction in his voice. "I was beginning to think I'd imagined it." Nova tilted her head slightly.
That feeling, he said.
"When our eyes meet. You feel it too, Dawn. Don't you?" After a moment, she gave the smallest of nods. "Good." A smile curved his lips. "At least I'm not going mad." He returned to his desk, leaving Nova breathless by the wall. The first week passed in a blur. Nova quickly learned the rhythm of his days and discovered an unexpected advantage in her new position. She could guard his food and drink from tampering. She inspected every dish brought to him, watching for enchantments, subtle discoloration, the faint shimmer of poison. But something else grew steadily more dangerous. The tension between them. It began with his eyes, how they followed her movements, how they darkened when she leaned close to pour his wine. By the second week came casual touches, fingers grazing when she handed him documents, a brush of his shoulder beside hers in the corridor. By the third week, Nova both dreaded and craved the evening ritual of helping him undress. Tradition required it, but every motion became exquisite torture. She would stand before him, hands trembling as she unfastened the ornate clasps of his jacket, avoiding his gaze, though she could feel its heat. The jacket would fall away, revealing the fine linen beneath. Her eyes, traitorous, drifted to the strong line of his throat, the glimpse of collarbone. "The shirt too, Star," he would say, his voice dropping just enough to unravel her. Each movement was practiced now. The careful tug of fabric, the deliberate averted eyes, the controlled breaths. But one night, as she reached for his shirt, his hand caught her wrist. "Have dinner with me," he said softly. Against her better judgment, she met his gaze. Hunger burned in it. "Not as my servant," he added. "As my guest." That night they dined alone in his private chambers. Candlelight softened the space. The usual distance between them melted into warmth and stolen glances. He insisted she sit across from him, watching with quiet pleasure as she tasted food she usually served. Though she said nothing, the silence between them buzzed with unspoken meaning. When she rose to clear the plates, he caught her hand. "Leave them," he said. "Sit with me by the fire." She obeyed, heart pounding. The firelight played across his face, his knee nearly brushing hers. The scent of him, rich, warm, familiar, made her wolf stir. He poured more wine, letting his fingers linger against hers. "When you're not with me," he murmured, "I find myself watching the door, waiting for your return." His voice dropped lower. "And when you're near, it's its own kind of torment because all I can think about is having you closer still." His gaze fell to her lips where a drop of wine clung. She froze. His thumb brushed across her mouth, removing the wine, but leaving heat in its place. These nights became a ritual. Dinner, conversation, the space between them narrowing. Some evenings his hand found hers in the firelight. Others he tucked a lock of hair behind her ear, fingertips lingering on her cheek. Nova tried to stay grounded. She reminded herself why she was here, to protect him, to finish her brother's shirts, to remain hidden until the curse was broken. But each night chipped away at her resolve. And each time he looked at her like she was his entire world, she felt it crumble a little more. "You're avoiding me," Damon said one evening after Nova had deliberately maintained her distance throughout dinner, moving away whenever he came too close. They were alone in his chambers, fire crackling in the hearth as night descended outside. She shook her head without looking up, busying herself with straightening objects that didn't need straightening. Liar, he said, but his tone held no accusation, only a heated awareness. Every time I come near, you find a reason to move away. Why? Nova kept her back to him, arranging books on a shelf with trembling fingers. She heard him approach, his footsteps deliberately slow, giving her every opportunity to retreat. Little Star, the way he said the name, rough, almost desperate, made her breath catch.
Please look at me.
She couldn't refuse him. Slowly, she turned, pressing her back against the bookshelf. There's something between us, he said, his voice low and intimate in the quiet room. From the moment I first saw you, something inside me changed. I dream of you when I close my eyes. His voice dropped to a whisper raw with emotion. I sense you even when you're not near. It's as though a part of my soul has always been yours, though my mind still struggles to understand why. Nova's chest tightened, her own wolf pressed against her consciousness, whining for its mate. You feel it too? He continued, bracing one arm against the bookshelf beside her head. I see it in your eyes. His gaze dropped to her lips, lingered there with naked hunger. Why do you fight it so? Because I can't be yours, she wanted to cry out. Because Morwen would destroy you if she knew who I really am. Because my brothers' lives depend on my silence. But she could say none of this. Could only stand trembling as he slowly raised his free hand to her face. Her eyes fluttered closed. A small involuntary sound, not quite a whimper, not quite a sigh escaping her throat. Don't, he whispered, his breath warm against her lips. Don't close your eyes. Slowly, giving her every chance to retreat, he lowered his mouth to hers. And then, 8 years of longing collapsed into a single heartbeat as his lips found hers. Gentle at first, a whisper, then everything at once. Fire raced through Nova's veins, consuming reason as his body pressed against her too close. And yet somehow she needed him closer still. The heat of his mouth, the taste of him, wine and desire, and barely restrained power. It was drowning and breathing all at once. When they finally broke apart, Damon rested his forehead against hers, his breathing as ragged as her own. A star, he breathed. Nova trembled in his embrace, joy and despair wearing within her. This was everything she had dreamed of for 8 long years, and everything she couldn't truly have until her vow was complete. As he drew her in for another kiss, his fingers tangling in her hair, Nova knew she was lost. 6 more months suddenly seemed an eternity, and the secret she kept between them, an abyss too wide to cross. Chapter 5. Candlelight flickered across Damon's face as he traced slow circles on Nova's palm. In moments like this, she could simply be a woman loved by a man, not a cursed princess with a kingdom to save. By day, they kept their distance. She was only his silent attendant. No lingering looks, no accidental touches. Even Morwen, now a frequent guest at court, paid her little attention, just another servant. But the witch's charming words and calculating smiles were reserved for Damon, circling him like a predator stalking prey. What's troubling you? Damon asked, sensing the tension in her shoulders. Your thoughts seem far away tonight. She shook her head and nestled closer. Even if she could speak, how could she explain that the woman now courting him had once destroyed her family?
Star.
He turned her gently. You're exhausted. You've been pushing yourself too hard. Nova averted her gaze. The final shirt was nearly finished. Her brother's freedom was within reach. Later, once Damon had drifted to sleep, she slipped from his embrace and moved silently through the secret passage leading to the servants' wing. Instead of returning to her quarters, she made her way to the kitchens and out through the back entrance. The last shirt was close to being finished, but she needed more wolfbane. The forest greeted her like an old friend. At the familiar clearing, she waited. Then came the sound she hoped for, a low, melodic howl. They emerged from the trees like shadows made flesh. 6 wolves larger than any natural beast. At their head, a silver-streaked wolf moved with quiet authority. Kaden. Nova dropped to her knees, arms wide. Her eldest brother pressed his head to her shoulder with a soft whine. The others surrounded her, nuzzling her with joy. Liam, the smallest, danced circles around her before proudly showing her the fresh wolf's bane they'd found. Tears stung her eyes as she buried her hands in their fur. Settling at the base of an ancient oak, she pulled out her sewing kit and worked by moonlight, her brothers forming a protective ring around her. Only when dawn's first light touched the horizon did she stop, the last sleeve nearly finished. With reluctance, she packed up. She had to return to Damon's bed before he woke to keep him from asking questions she couldn't answer. But when she reached the royal wing, her heart sank. Guards stood posted outside his chambers. Star, she turned at the familiar voice. Leora, one of the kitchen girls, rushed toward her. The king's been looking everywhere, she whispered. He came to the kitchens himself at dawn asking for you. Nova's stomach twisted. The guards let her pass. Inside, she found Damon by the window, his hair tousled. He turned at her entrance, relief flooding his face. Where have you been? He asked softly, crossing to her. I woke and you were gone. She lowered her eyes.
Star.
Her name was a plea. I imagined the worst. That you'd been taken, hurt, that you'd left. She shook her head, finally meeting his eyes. Never. Then where? He asked. Where do you go when you disappear? What secret calls you away from me? Exhaustion and guilt crashed over her. The room blurred. She swayed. Then darkness took her. She awoke to cool linens and quiet voices. Simply exhaustion, Your Majesty. Nothing that rest won't cure, the physician said. You're certain? Damon asked, tension in his voice. Quite certain, though I would recommend several days of complete rest. The bed dipped as Damon sat beside her, keeping a respectful distance. Rest now, he whispered, brushing her hair. I'll be here when you wake. Nova slipped back into sleep.
She didn't know how long she
slept, but when she stirred again, warm light filled the room. Damon's voice drifted from nearby, low and thoughtful. I never understood the old tales of mate bonds, he said. My father called them romantic nonsense. A soft laugh. He'd be appalled to see his son so thoroughly ensnared. She stayed still, afraid to break the spell of his words. From the moment I truly saw you, he murmured, something changed in me, like a missing piece finally returned. Her heart pounded. I think you're my mate, Star, he whispered. My wolf has never responded to anyone like it does to you. His thumb brushed her wrist. I want you to be mine, not just in stolen moments, but before the world. Tears welled behind her closed eyes. Everything she longed for, offered freely. But she couldn't accept. Not yet. Not with her brother still cursed. Not with Morwen waiting to strike. I know you carry secrets, he said gently. Whatever they are, we can face them together. His voice grew more certain. When you're well again, I intend to ask you properly, to offer you my heart, my crown, my life. A soft kiss pressed her hand. Until then, rest and heal, my star. A week passed. Nova returned to her duties, though Damon watched her more closely now. She worked on the shirt in quiet, stolen moments. Then came the evening she had been dreading. Damon dismissed his advisors early and asked for a private dinner. When the meal was cleared, he offered his hand. Walk with me. He led her into the royal gardens to the patch where wolfsbane grew silver in the moonlight. Do you remember the first time I truly saw you? He asked beside a stone bench. Before you, I was only a king. But now, he breathed deeply. Now I cannot imagine life without you. Her heart raced. She knew what was coming, though we've never spoken of it directly. Surely you feel what lies between us, he said, voice thick with emotion. He dropped to one knee. My wolf has chosen you, he whispered. My heart has chosen you. I wish for you to become my queen, my mate, my everything. Tears clouded Nova's vision as she gazed down at him, her heart breaking in two. She wanted to say yes. Gods above. How she yearned to throw herself into his arms to embrace the future he offered. But Morwen's calculating eyes flashed in her memory, followed by images of her brothers trapped in wolf form, waiting for her to fulfill her vow. If she accepted him now, became his queen, Morwen would surely recognize her, would know her curse had not been complete, and Daemon would be caught in the crossfire, perhaps falling victim to the same fate as her father. With her heart shattering into countless pieces, Nova gently withdrew her hands from his. Confusion crossed his features. "You cannot truly mean this," he said, rising to his feet. "Star, I know what lies between us. I have felt it every time we touch." She stepped back again, shaking her head.
Why?
He asked, voice raw. "I know you care for me. I know you feel this bond." She pointed away from herself, toward the palace, toward duty, sacrifice. "You believe yourself unworthy?"
He guessed.
"I care nothing for your lineage, Star. Royal blood means little to me." If only he knew. She shook her head again more desperately. "Please," he whispered, reaching for her. "Whatever burden you carry, we can face it together. Just don't turn away from this. From us." But she stepped out of reach. The hurt in his eyes transformed to something worse. Resignation. "I see," he said quietly. "I was mistaken then." "No," she wanted to cry out. "You weren't mistaken. I love you more than I can bear. Forgive me for misunderstanding," he continued. "I won't trouble you with this again." He turned away, his shoulders rigid with dignity, despite the rejection. Nova watched him walk away, her hand rising involuntarily, as if to call him back. 6 more months of silence. 6 more months before she could explain, before she could beg his forgiveness and pray his heart hadn't hardened against her.
Completely.
But first, she had a shirt to finish and brothers to save. Rising on trembling legs, Nova wiped away her tears and turned toward the forest, where 6 wolves waited for her return. Duty before love, it had always been so for royalty. Chapter 6. A fortnight had passed since Nova's heart-shattering rejection of Daemon's proposal. 14 days of aching silence, of returning to the kitchens, no longer welcome in his chambers, no longer greeted by secret smiles, the palace whispered. Some said she had refused the king and been dismissed. Others claimed she'd been caught stealing or spying. None guessed the truth, that she had sacrificed her own happiness to protect the man she loved and the brothers who depended on her. The hardest part wasn't returning to the kitchens. It was the moments when her path crossed Daemon's. Each glance, each silence carved deeper into her already broken heart.
His eyes had changed.
Once warm amber, they were now dull with resignation. His face had grown hollow, shadowed with sleepless nights. His skin, once golden, had lost its glow. And Morwen circled him like a hawk. Each of her smiles was a dagger in Nova's chest. Yet the separation gave her time. Each night, by candlelight, her fingers flew over the wolfsbane fibers. The 6th shirt was nearly done. Just a sleeve left now.
2 more nights maybe.
But then came the banquet. The autumn feast drew nobles from across the kingdom. 1,000 candles lit the grand hall. Nova, by cruel twist of fate, was assigned to serve the high table directly in Daemon's line of sight. She had nearly made it through the interminable evening when he rose to his feet, goblet in hand. The hall fell silent, all eyes turning to the king. Nova froze near the wall, a serving tray clutched to her chest like a shield. The room hushed. Nova froze near the wall, tray tight to her chest. "Esteemed guests," Daemon said, his voice carrying through the hall. "I wish to share joyous news on this celebration. Night." Something in his tone made Nova look up. What she saw sent ice through her veins. Daemon's posture was rigid, unnatural. His eyes, those eyes she knew better than her own, held an unfamiliar glassy sheen, with the faintest hint of unnatural silver light at their centers. "Queen Morwen of Silverest has done me the great honor of accepting my proposal of marriage." A gasp rippled through the hall. Morwen rose, triumphant, placing a possessive hand on his arm. "Our union will bring prosperity to both our kingdoms." Daemon continued, voice flat. "The wedding will take place at the next full moon." The tray slipped from Nova's hands, clattering to the floor. She knew this look, this hollowness. Her father had worn the same expression before the end. Heads turned, demons included. For a moment, recognition, pain. But Morwen's grip tightened, and the light in his eyes dulled again. Nova backed away, heading for the servants' exit. Guards, seize that girl. Morwen's voice cut through the hall.
Nova Froze.
Guards blocked her path. The witch pointed, crimson nails gleaming. This servant is a witch who has been attempting to enchant His Majesty. Gasps, murmurs, accusations found eager ears. Hadn't Damon shown strange interest in her? Now the whispers turned to nods. Only when I arrived did I recognize the signs of enchantment. Morwen said, standing beside the vacant-eyed king. I have broken her spell, and the king has returned to his senses. Is this not so, my love? Damon didn't flinch. Yes, he said flatly. I was bewitched. Lord Brennan stepped forward, troubled. Your Majesty, this seems a hasty judgment. The girl cannot even speak. How could she cast spells? Nova shook her head desperately, eyes pleading. The king himself confirms it, Morwen insisted. Is that not enough? Damon's gaze remained distant. Yes, she is a witch. The guards seized her, dragging her through familiar halls, down into the dungeon's cold stone belly. A cell door clanged shut. Nova sank to the floor, shaking with rage and fear. Morwen had Damon under the same enchantment she once used on her father. And just like then, the witch would drain him to feed her magic, and Nova, bound by her vow, could not cry out. Hours later, footsteps echoed. The door creaked open and Morwen entered, smiling. She dismissed the guards and stepped inside. At last, she said, circling like a predator. The lost princess at my mercy, once more. Nova kept her face blank, though her heart raced. Did you truly believe I wouldn't recognize you? Those silver eyes are unmistakable. She traced Nova's cheek with a crimson nail. I've known since the king announced me as his guest. You thought you could hide among the servants. But I never forget a face, especially one I've hunted for years. She chuckled. I should have cursed you along with your brothers. A mistake I won't repeat. Nova's hands clenched, her wolf stirred. Your father made that same face. Morwen mused. He died calling your name, begging me to spare his children. She turned to the window, moonlight casting cruel beauty over her face. Such wasted breath. Nova stepped forward, fury rising. Oh, does that anger you? Morwen laughed. Your mate will suffer the same fate. Already his life force strengthens me. By our wedding night, he'll be little more than a shell. Nova lunged, but froze mid-motion, paralyzed. You always were impulsive, Morwen chided. No discipline, no patience. She released the spell. Nova stumbled, catching herself. The execution is set for dawn, Morwen said, heading for the door. A swift beheading. Nothing dramatic. The king insisted. Some final scrap of affection, I suppose. She turned at the threshold, eyes gleaming. Oh, and your brothers will be there to witness your death. I've arranged a special hunt. 6 forest wolves captured alive, brought to the execution grounds. Poetic, isn't it?
A family reunion at the end.
The door slammed shut. Alone. Nova collapsed to the floor, mind racing.
Dawn. She
had until dawn to save them all. Her fingers slipped into the hidden pocket of her dress. She drew out the nearly finished 6th shirt. Wolfsbane threads glowing faintly in the dark. Only a few rows of weaving remained. She glanced to the barred window. The full moon would rise in 3 days. Morwen's chosen wedding night. With trembling hands, Nova began to weave. Chapter 7. Dawn bathed Ironhold Palace in hues of gold and crimson. As Nova stood on the execution platform, her hands bound, the breeze tugging at her simple dress, in her grasp, hidden inside a cloth sack, were the 6 completed Wolfsbane shirts. Her final request granted by a careless guard who saw no harm in letting a condemned witch clutch her good luck charms. A crowd had gathered, nobles in fine velvet, servants in drab linen, hungry to witness the execution of the woman accused of enchanting their king. Nova saw none of them. Her eyes searched for the only ones who mattered. There, at the edge of the square, 6 oversized wolves strained within iron-barred cages, eyes locked on her with anguished recognition. Caden hurled himself against the bars, his silver streaked for straw with blood from repeated attempts to break free. Morwen had kept her promise. Her brothers were here to watch her die. Across from her, the witch sat poised and gleaming in midnight blue, a silver circlet on her brow. Beside her, Damon slumped in his throne-like chair, eyes dull with silver light, his skin pale, his movement sluggish, every breath a little more stolen by Morwen's spell. Lord Brennan hovered near, his concern evident, though Morwen intercepted every attempt he made to reach Damon. A herald stepped forward, voice booming. Star, servant of Ironhold Palace, has been found guilty of witchcraft and the enchantment of His Majesty, King Damon Blackthorn. The sentence is death to be carried out immediately. The executioner approached with an axe slung over his shoulder. Have you any final words? The herald
sneered.
Oh, I forget.
You cannot speak.
Morwen laughed, sharp as glass. How fortunate. Witches are known to curse with their dying breath. Nova heard none of it. Her focus stayed on her brothers and on Damon. She had completed the 6th shirt just before dawn, the final stitch sewn as the first light breached the horizon. All 6 shirts now rested in the sack, ready for their purpose. The executioner positioned the block before her, its surface stained dark from countless previous executions. The guards moved forward to force her to her knees. Just as they reached for her, a tremendous crash erupted from the edge of the square. The iron bars of the wolves' cages buckled. The assembled crowd gasped, many scrambling backward as 6 enormous wolves surged free, bounding toward the execution platform with supernatural speed.
Stop them.
Morwen shrieked, rising from her throne. Archers, guards. Nova broke her bonds with sudden strength. She upended the sack. 6 wolf-spaned shirts unfurling into the air like falling stars. Caden Liam, she cried, her voicier and strange after 9 years of silence. Brothers to me. The wolves leapt, each shirt landing perfectly upon a wolf's back. As they landed around her in a protective ring, silver light erupted from the fabric. Brilliant pulsing waves that blinded the crowd. Fur receded, limbs lengthened. When the light finally faded, Nova stood surrounded not by wolves, but by 6 men in resplendent royal attire. The wolf-spaned shirts had transformed along with their wearers, becoming elegant doublets of silver and midnight blue, embroidered with the wolf emblem of House Silvercrest. Nova's own simple dress had transformed as well, becoming a gown of shimmering silver that caught the light with every movement, like a star brought down to earth. What sorcery is this? Someone gasped from the crowd. Caden stepped forward, his voice strong. Not sorcery, justice. He took Nova's hand. People of Ironhold, he declared. We are the royal family of Silverest, cursed by the witch Morwen 9 years ago. I am Crown Prince Caden. These are my brothers. And this, he looked to Nova, is our sister, Princess Nova of Silverest. Murmurs of amazement swept through the crowd. Nobles who had visited Silvercrest in years past studied their faces, recognition dawning in their expressions. On her throne, Morwen snarled.
Lies.
The silver crest line was extinguished. Confusion rippled through the assembly. Guards looking to each other uncertainly. Nobles whispering furiously behind raised hands. Sighs the impostors. Morwen shrieked. They aim to overthrow your king. Some guards moved, others faltered. Brennan looked to Damon, unsure. Your Majesty, he said. What are your orders? But Damon didn't answer. He sat slumped, the silver in his eyes brightening, his skin nearly translucent. He was slipping away. He cannot hear you, Nova said, her voice growing stronger. Look at him. She's killing him just as she killed our father. Fighting broke out between loyalists and Morwen's guards. Chaos erupted. Nova, we must reach the king, Caden said. With her brothers guarding her, Nova pushed toward the D's. She broke free at the last moment, sprinting up the steps just as Damon collapsed. Damon, she cried, catching him. His skin was ice, his breaths ragged. It's too late, Morwen sneered, retreating. His life has been mine for weeks. Liam, Nova called, don't let her escape. With a flash of steel, Liam vaulted past the chaos, landing before Morwen with his sword to her throat. Not another word, which he growled. On the D's, Nova cradled Damon's head in her lap, panic rising as his breathing grew more labored. Damon, she called, stroking his face. Damon, come back to me. His eyelids fluttered, the silver glow within pulsing weakly, but he showed no sign of recognition. The enchantment still held him, even as it drained his final reserves. How do I break it? Nova demanded, looking to her grandmother's. Spirit. You know the answer, child, the spirit said softly. With the ancient magic of your kind. To claim is to free. Nova's breath caught. The bond, of course. Nova's eyes widened in understanding. The mate bond between them had formed, but remained incomplete, a half-connection that had left Damon vulnerable to Morwen's magic. To break the enchantment, she would need to claim him properly in the way of wolves. Without hesitation, Nova lowered her face to Damon's neck, finding the pulse point where his scent was strongest. Forgive me, she whispered against his skin, then bit down firmly, her teeth breaking the surface just enough to mark him as hers. Power surged between them instantly, raw primal magic that had nothing to do with spells or potions. The mate bond roared to life, a golden thread connecting their souls that no enchantment could sever. The silver light was forced from Damon's eyes, dissipating into the air with a high, thin wail of defeated magic. Beneath her, Damon shuddered, his body arching as if in pain. Then the silver light burst from his eyes in a blinding flash, dissipating into the morning air. For a moment, he lay still in her arms. Then his eyes flew open, clear amber, free of enchantment, fixing directly on her face with bewilderment. Star, he murmured, his hand rising weakly to touch her face. I'm so sorry, she said, tears spilling down her cheeks. I love you. I have always loved you. Despite his weakness, Damon smiled. That same smile that had first captured her heart. You're here, he said simply, as if that were the only thing that mattered. Then, with a surge of unexpected strength, he pulled her down to him, and with a growl that was more wolf than man, he turned his face to her neck, returning the claiming bite with one of his own. The mate bond between them flared complete, unbreakable, eternal. Then Damon's gaze darted around, taking in the chaos of the square, the transformed princes, and Nova's royal attire. Confusion clouded his features. Star, what's happening? Liam stepped forward, his royal bearing unmistakable despite his years as a wolf. You will address my sister with the title she is due, he said firmly. She is Princess Nova of Silverest, daughter of King Kais. Damon's eyes widened as he looked back at Nova. You're the princess? The lost princess of Silverest? Nova squeezed his hand. Later, she said, pointing to the continued fighting in the square. First, we need to stop this. Damon struggled to his feet with Nova's assistance. The fighting in the square continued, guards battling guards in the confusion of divided loyalties. Enough, Damon roared, his alpha voice rippling with power that froze every combatant mid-swing. Lower your weapons now. The square fell silent, all eyes turning to the D's where the Alpha King stood with unmistakable authority despite his recent weakness. Guards, Damon continued, his voice leaving no room for disobedience. Arrest the witch Morwen for treason, attempted raicide, and poisoning your king. This time, the guards moved without hesitation, surrounding Morwen and clasping enchanted iron manacles around her wrists to suppress her magic. Teach, this isn't over, the witch hissed as they dragged her away. I have powers beyond your imagining. And I have family, Nova replied simply. Something you could never understand. As the witch was led away, Damon turned to Nova, his eyes filled with questions. There is much I don't understand, he said quietly. But one thing I know beyond doubt. His hand rose to touch the claiming mark on his neck, then the matching one on hers. We are bound now, as we were always meant to be. Nova smiled up at him, her first true smile in 9 years. Yes, she said, savoring the simple joy of speaking to her mate at last. And I have so much to tell you. Epilogue. 1 month after Morwen's defeat, the grandest celebration in living memory united the kingdoms of Ironhold and Silverest.
Nova
Stood before the ancient heart tree in the palace gardens. Not a silent servant girl, but a princess in her full glory. Her gown shimmered like starlight woven from silk as silver as her eyes, a delicate crown of silver and moonstone resting on her brow. At her side stood Daemon, resplendent in midnight blue and silver, his strength fully restored, his amber gaze fixed on her alone. The claiming marks on their necks remained visible above their formal attire, a proud declaration of a bond that transcended royal custom. Before them stood crowned King Caden of Silverest, silver-streaked hair crowned with their father's restored circlet. Since reclaiming the throne, he had proven himself every bit their father's heir, his years as a wolf granting him quiet wisdom. Today, Caden's voice rang out across the gathered nobility. We witness not merely the union of two people, but the healing of a wound that has festered between our lands for too long. Nova's 5 brothers stood beside their king, each restored to his rightful place. Liam, the youngest, gave her a cheeky wink. My sister, Caden, continued, preserved her silence for 10 years to save us. Now I ask you to speak freely before these witnesses, the vows that will bind you to your mate and your kingdoms to each other. Nova's voice, once forbidden, rang clear as silver bells. I, Nova of House Silverest, take you, Daemon of House Blackthorn, as my mate and my king. What was claimed in private, I now declare in public. Our lives are bound, our souls are one, our kingdoms united through our bond. Daemon's reply was rich with alpha strength, yet tender with love. I, Daemon of House Blackthorn, take you, Nova of House Silverest, as my mate, my queen, and my heart. What began in silence shall flourish in harmony. 2 crowns but 1 throne, 2 kingdoms but 1 rule, 2 wolves but 1 pack. Caden placed his hands over theirs. Then by the power of both our houses, I declare you husband and wife, king and queen, mates. Bound by laws both human and wolf. As their lips met, sealing their vows, magic shimmered in the air, no longer the dark enchantments of Morwen, but the ancient primal magic of true mates. Magic of broken things made whole again. That evening at the grand feast, Nova danced with each of her brothers in turn, their joy reclaiming 9 years of stillness. When she returned to Daemon, his hand found hers beneath the table, thumb tracing the calluses left by years of weaving wolf's bane. No regrets, he asked softly, his eyes searching hers. You spent so long in silence, away from them, away from what was rightfully yours. Nova shook her head, a smile blooming on lips no longer bound. How could I regret the path that led me to you? The silence was my sacrifice, but finding you was my reward. From opposite ends of the high table, the royal houses of Silverest and Ironhold raised their goblets in unison. Wolves once divided, now 1 pack. And in the palace gardens, silver wolf Spain bloomed beside ironwood flowers, their roots entwining beneath the soil, as the futures of 2 kingdoms now grew together, separate yet one, distinct yet, bound by a love that endured 9 years of silence to speak at last. Thank you so much for listening. I hope you enjoyed the story. I'd love to hear what you think. Let me know in the comments. See you in the next story. With love, Genesis.